Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month of Picture This, the Best Picture podcast or show where we go through every single Best Picture nominee in history. And this year we're doing, or this month we're doing the year of 2012. Chad is my co-host, Chad Webb. Chad, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I had a great time with this slate of films.
Yep.
It's been a it's been a long 10 years since this slate, so
Yeah.
it'll be fun to talk about them. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. We are doing this because of the 10-year retrospective that I have been doing. Not a lot on this channel itself, but in my Letterboxd, I've been going back and watching all these movies, including other movies of 2012, some that Chad has displayed behind him as well, that were worth taking a second look at, or maybe a first look at 10 years later, because it's always fun to measure a whole decade and see how much changes. But these 9 movies that were nominated for Best Picture that we are talking about today are
Amour, Argo, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Django Unchained, Les Miserables, Life of Pi, Lincoln, Silver Linings Playbook, and Zero Dark 30.
So yeah, 9 great movies. But before we get to that, we like to talk a little bit about the year itself and some of the other films that were nominated, maybe some notable births, deaths, albums. Chad always likes to tell us about the albums, and then just talking a little bit about the ceremony itself before we dive into these 9 films specifically. And then at the end, after we have talked about our 9 films, we will rank our 9 films in the orders that we prefer these movies in terms of preference. And then at the end, we will each award a Best Actor and a Best Actress of these 9 movies that we think deserves to be on the Picture This Hall of Fame of great performances from these movies. So, Chad, tell us a little bit about the year 2012.
Yeah, I was actually in college, or actually coming out of college around this. I was entering the workforce at this point, and I think Dylan was still in like grade school or something.
I was a
But
freshman in high school. Yeah, eighth
there you
grade.
go.
Eighth grade to high school. That was like the transition, middle school to high school. So it was a big year. Big year.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I kept this brief because we have 9 films to discuss. So here's the history. And a lot of it is kind of depressing, actually. I tried to lighten it up at the end. 2012 was designated as the International Year of Cooperatives and the International Year of Sustainable Energy for All. That's good. That's a good thing. There was a Greek government debt crisis, not so great. They held elections to replace 300 members of that government. Vladimir Putin was elected president of Russia again. There was a shooting in a movie theater in Colorado during a screening of The Dark Knight Rises. Terrible.
Hmm.
The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting happened. That was also terrible, but big news. But Curiosity the rover lands on Mars. Hurricane Sandy happens and causes tons of damage. Barack Obama beats Mitt Romney. And the Washington State officially legalizes the possession of cannabis for personal use. That's
Cool.
all I had for the year, but I have
Yeah,
births
births,
and
deaths. Yeah,
deaths.
everything you got.
Yeah, I just have 3 for births. It's Blue Ivy Carter, Princess Athena of Denmark, Princess Estelle, Duchess of Ostergotland, and that's all that they had listed. So I
Yeah,
didn't really have a
I mean they're
choice.
only 10-year-olds at this point. This is
Right.
a more modern year. Sometimes when we get into like 70s and 60s and 50s, we get some real heavy hitters. But hopefully, those 3 will grow up to be some of the biggest celebrities we've ever had.
Boom. Deaths, very sad. Joe Paterno, Whitney Houston, Davy Jones, Joel Goldsmith, son of Jerry Goldsmith, Donna Summer, Richard Dawson, Ray Bradbury, Anne Rutherford, Rodney King, Richard Lynch, Nora Ephron, Andy Griffith, Sally Ride, Marvin Hamlish, Tony Scott, Neil Armstrong, and Andy Williams.
Some tough losses there. And Chad, are there any albums that came out in 2012 worth
Oh,
noting? Oh, he's
hell
he's got some
yeah.
show and tell today too.
Well, yeah, I just got 2 great albums. This is maybe one of the best albums ever made. It is Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. Phenomenal album if you haven't heard that one yet. And he just released a new album this year, and it's fantastic as well. And then you have by Tame Impala, you have Lunarism. Fantastic, fantastic album. And then you also have some other great ones that I love, especially Channel Orange by Frank Ocean. You also have the
Mm,
Money Store by Death Grips, Bloom by Beach House, and Awesome Wave by Alt J. Okay, prepare for this. This is a long one. The idler wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than ropes will ever do by Fiona Apple.
wow,
Born to Die by Lana Del Rey, The Seer by Swans, and Visions by Grimes,
nice.
the woman who married Elon Musk.
So now transitioning into the actual ceremony itself. Before the ceremony happened, though, there were some films that were snubbed of nominations, and it was a very sad day because as we know, in 2009 they started allowing more and more films to get nominated. So obviously there was room for genre films, but sadly some genre films missed out. One in particular, which was a big heavy hitter, being Looper. Another genre film, more of like a really indie, quirky comedy genre film, Moonrise Kingdom, was also considered another huge snub. Those were like the two most notable snubs in terms of like precursors that I saw. But Chad, are there any other notable films of 2012 that you want to bring up that you love or that you think should be recognized? I have some as well, but I would love to hear yours first.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have some notable films, and then I broke away the ones that I would have considered possible Best Picture worthy. Not to necessarily replace any of these, maybe one, but yeah. So here we go. Notable films: Chronicle, The Secret World of Arrietty, 21 Jump Street, Jeff Who Lives at Home, The Hunger Games, The Raid Redemption, Goon, The Cabin in the Woods, The Avengers, Fury, Men in Black 3, Prometheus, Safety Not Guaranteed, Brave, Ted, The Amazing Spider Man, The Dark Knight Rises, Ruby Sparks, The Bourne Legacy, The Campaign, Paranorman, End of Watch, Trouble with the Curve, Frankenweenie, Pitch Perfect, Here Comes the Boom, Flight, The Bay, The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2, The Hobbit An Unexpected Journey, Jack Reacher, and The Impossible. And then here's for my best picture worthy: Moonrise Kingdom, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Looper, Seven Psychopaths, Skyfall, and Wreck It Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, you said pretty much all the ones I would have brought up anyway. And I will be doing, after I do my whole retrospective on Letterboxd, where I look at all these movies. I am going to be doing a top 10 eventually, so I will save some of my favorite personal picks for later, because I'll tell you, my top two were not Best Picture nominated. One did win an Oscar for a different category, and then one was not nominated for any Oscars, which is quite shocking. But those will be on my top 10 video. But those were really, really great films. The 2012 ceremony itself, also not that notable. I mean, nothing crazy happened, no Moonlights and La La Land scenarios, but it was hosted by Seth MacFarlane. Big year for Seth MacFarlane because he had Ted coming out that year. I actually have Ted as a little
Funny
co-host
movie.
joining us today, right here.
Oh, look at
But
that.
yeah, big year for Seth MacFarlane. His movie Ted was nominated for Best Original Song. Everybody Needs a Best Friend. Sadly, Thunder Buddies was snubbed for Best Song. Isn't that right, Ted? But Seth MacFarlane, obviously a very funny guy, opened the show with a little bit of a controversial song called "I Saw Your Boobs," naming all the different pairs of them that he's seen in different movies from different people, like Kate Winslet and Jennifer Lawrence and all these different people. But some found it funny, some found it a little offensive. But then the ceremony itself did kind of honor the art of music in film. There were a lot of great homages to some of the classic scores and soundtrack bites of cinema, which was really nice. That was kind of the angle that the show itself ran in. In terms of notable like moments, there really wasn't a ton. The most notable thing that had people talking was the nomination itself. The snubbing of Ben Affleck. Argo was nominated, it won BAFTA, won Golden Globe, it won Critics' Choice, and it went on to win the Oscar. But Ben Affleck notably missed his directing nomination for it, and it was the first time ever since Driving Miss Daisy in 1989 where the director for the Best Picture wasn't even nominated for Best Director, and that would go on to repeat again with Green Book, where Peter Farrelly was not nominated for Best Director, and again in 2021 when Sean Heater was not nominated for Coda. So it has happened three times since 2012, but it was a very big rarity. We will talk more about Argo in a few movies, but let's kick it off first with maybe a pretty sad note, if you will. Let's start with the French Austrian film Amour.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to go to Amour, directed by Michael Haneke, written by Michael Haneke, cinematography by Darius Kanji. Do you want to do the starring for Amour, actually,
Sure,
Dale?
I could try it. I'm just gonna name the main three. So we have ready for this? Jean-Louis Trintignant. Trintignant is how you pronounce it. I would not have been able to get that without a hyphenated spelling guide. So thank you, Wikipedia. Also, Emmanuel Riva and Isabelle Huppert, who three very notable international stars, but they were all first faces for me when I saw this movie for the first time. So pretty cool.
Same. Synopsis: An elderly woman has a stroke, and her life starts to deteriorate as her elderly husband struggles to cope with the circumstance.
Yeah. So with the summary, you all who have not seen it can probably gauge that it is not a cheery watch. It is not a hopeful watch. It is not a positive, optimistic watch. It's rather bleak and rather depressing. I have been recommending this movie for a while to Chad, and Chad has finally checked it out for this video. So I'd like to turn it over to Chad first. What are your thoughts on Amour? Because it is a very different film than pretty much all the other films on this list. Even the one that is literally called The Miserable, I would say this is probably the most miserable of them all. What do you have to say about Amour?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting kind of a different style of best picture. I feel like you don't see a lot of these, too often.
Right.
Kind of a little bit of like a, like a got a Manchester by the Sea feel where it's like, kind of a day in the life, but it's like also got actually both have very tragic, tones and spirals to them. But yeah, more, it's just it's depressing, but it's also just a very realistic look at like what
Mhm.
people would go through in such a tragic circumstance such as this. Like, people actually go through things like this where someone has a sudden stroke and things just don't get better. And then they have to get like, spoon fed. They have to be like actually taken to the bathroom, have their, be washed by somebody. And they don't shy away from any of this stuff, and they kind of just like have it all there on the screen. You get to see this man just kind of like wondering, like, what's next? What do I do? How long do we live like this? It didn't go to like this extreme, but like, I know I've known people personally, like, my wife who's been through things like this where someone has to go into, like not intensive care, but like hospice and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And it's just a very, sad thing when someone is just slowly dying. And,
Yeah.
this movie just depicts that. And honestly, it's weird because Michael Haneke seems to do this a lot, where like he'll kind of turn it a little bit into a horror movie, where you
Yeah.
have like some weird like jump scares that happen a little bit,
Yeah.
like what just happened?
Yeah.
But like, it kind of like I think embodies that that fear and loneliness and just you don't know what's coming next,
Yeah.
kind of vibe. And yeah, depressing but very good, I feel.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said horror movie. When people ask like, what is the scariest movie you've ever watched?" I always say Amour, and they look at me like I'm kind of crazy, and I'm like, it is the scariest movie I think since Nightmare on Elm Street. I'll tell you why. Nightmare on Elm Street is terrifying because sleep is something we as humans must do. So with the fact that the villain attacks in its sleep, you have to sleep. There's no way to keep yourself awake without, suffering some really bad health consequences and insomnia and all this stuff. Like humans have to sleep. So it's almost like an undeniable face off you're going to have with this villain, and that is what's scary about it, is you cannot hide. In this case, getting old, it's a necessity unless you die young. Everyone who reaches that age will go through this in terms of not necessarily a stroke, but in terms of aging and finding yourself a little more reliant on other people because you cannot necessarily take care of yourself fully, or you are around people that are dealing with age. Like this is real. And I think that's why it is so scary to me, is that I am young. We are both young people, but we either, like you said, know someone who is older or was older and went through this, or we just know that it's coming for us someday, and there's almost a sadness to it. But I honestly kind of appreciate how bleak and straightforward it is, because a lot of the times people look for movies as escapism, but I think you also have to use movies as a way of, coping with reality at times. And a lot of these movies deal with historical events. And I think Amour is something that's so universal because it doesn't even specify a certain figure in history or a certain time period. It can appeal to any time, any person, anywhere, any scenario. It doesn't have to be in French. It doesn't have to be an Austrian film. It, as it is, can appeal to anyone who watches it. And I think that's what, not necessarily appeal, but can resonate with everyone who watches it. And I think that's what's so powerful about it, is how universal it is, and how getting older is just something you cannot, not do. And I think that's what makes it so terrifying, and what makes it, like you said, a horror movie. And not just the jump scares, but the jump scares add to it. And especially the ending too, seeing what he does when, he is at that breaking point. But is it really a breaking point, or is this his way of saving his wife, essentially, and saving her suffering, his decision? And I am by no means condoning his decision, nor am I, kind of arguing his decision either. I think the movie justifies the decision that the main characters make, and it makes it all the more heartbreaking. And I think for a movie called Love, Amour translates to love. Um, you know, if you look at it as a love story too, what does that mean? Like, what are the depths you go to love someone, and what are the things you do or don't do in order to show that love? And where do you have to kind of like cross the line and say, but this is what I think is best for you? Or do you honor that person's wishes and say, all right, if you don't want me to do anything, I won't do anything. I'll let you be how you are. It is very haunting and very scary. So I think you hit the nail on the head with the horror aspect because it's totally chilling.
Absolutely. And yeah, I gotta say, like, I like the comparison you made to Nightmare on Elm Street, because people, will often say like, "Oh, Amour's not a horror movie," or like, "This isn't a horror Spencer's not a horror movie." And I go,
Yep.
well, just actually like look at what it's doing and
Yeah.
like the actual themes of it, and
Yeah.
it's scary as hell. But
Yeah, it's
like
like
I
Halloween.
actually
Halloween, it's like you can move out of Haddonfield, you know. But here it's like in Nightmare on Elm Street, you can't just not fall asleep ever again. Here it's like you can't just like age backwards. This isn't Benjamin Button, you know.
yeah.
It's there's no escape.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that point up, because I said that exact thing in a debate, and it's what won me the debate, saying that A Nightmare on Elm Street is the scariest movie, because I said the
There you go.
exact same thing: is you can't escape the dreams, you can't escape the sleep. And I also love in this movie, I just wanted to point out that, because I had to rewind it, because I was like seeing him set up all these little things. I'm like, what is he doing with cutting the flowers and stuff like that? And then you rewind to the beginning, and then you're like, oh, he's setting up everything you saw in the beginning. And then it's kind of even creepier when
Mhm.
you go back to the beginning
Yeah.
and you see just the dead body in the bed and stuff, and it's like, oh god.
Yeah, it's very, very haunting, and just yeah, every time I watch it, which is not a lot because it's a hard movie to rewatch. I think rewatchability, this would rank pretty low, but
Slow
I I,
movie,
I
yeah.
I think it's one of those movies though where when I watch it, I gain something more from it every time because I get older with every viewing. Like I the other day, I my back was sore and I was like, I don't know this feeling, and I'm only 24. You know, it's like one of those things where like I can't even imagine that age, and as I get older, my grandparents get older, and other people around me just get older, and it's like one of those things you have to face, for better or for worse. And I like that, like you said, it's an unconventional Best Picture nominee because I feel like sometimes the Best Picture Oscar bait that people like to describe is either uplifting or makes you feel good, and sometimes it has to be. Sometimes you need your codas to offset your powers of the dogs. But like in this case, I actually like something that does just present life in the most honest manner. And I do think there are sparks of humanity in this, even more so than the kind of manufactured like Hollywood like huzzah moments that you see in some of these other movies. It's like this one just is real through and through. And it's bleak and it's devastating, but I think that's exactly what it's going for, and it nails it. So I really can't complain about it because it's not going to give you that triumphant ending that so many of the other films do because that's not what it is. So, Amour is nominated for 5 nominations. It only wins one, which is Best Foreign Language Film, and it won that award for the country of Austria. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Michael Haneke, Best Actress, Emmanuel Riva, who was the oldest and still is the oldest Best Actress nominee ever. For this role,
Wow.
and it's funny because she was up against the youngest Best Actress nominee of all time in this same year, which was really funny. The age difference between the two is quite jarring. And then a Best Original Screenplay. Um, so speaking of the opposite in terms of what I was just saying about cold endings versus triumphant ones, here's a film that had a very triumphant ending, including a triumphant ending on Oscar night, winning Best Picture, and that is Argo. Chad, tell us about Argo.
Yep, Argo, directed by Ben Affleck or Batfleck, written by Chris Terrio, cinematography by Rodrigo Prieto, music by Alexandre Desplat, starring Ben Affleck, Bryan Cranston, Alan Arkin, John Goodman, Tate Donovan, Clea Duvall, Christopher Denham, Scoot McNairy, Carrie Bishi, Rory Cochrane, Victor Garber, Kyle Chandler, and more. Synopsis: the CIA uses a fake science fiction film crew to rescue American diplomats from Iran.
Yeah. So it's kind of a historical film at one part. It's got a little bit of comedy with the making of the movie. It's got a little sci-fi of the movie they're actually making. It is ultimately a thriller at the end of it. It's tackling a lot of different genres. And I do think that that adds to a lot of the appeal that won over the Academy because they always say if you make a movie about Hollywood, it's gonna win over the Academy, and there is a truth to that. But then it's kind of putting a spin on that and using the art of Hollywood and filmmaking to assist a even bigger objective and even bigger motive and even bigger mission. So Chad, I really haven't really gotten a gauge of your thoughts on this film. We've talked about it a few times, but I don't really know where you stand on it. So please tell us, what do you think of Argo?
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's interesting because coming off of Amour, that was a first time watch. This was a second watch, but it was like back in 2012, I wasn't as like critical think minded as I am now when I watch films. So coming in now, watching it again with more of a critical mind, I thought it's definitely very well made. I really like Ben Affleck as a director. I love Gone Baby Gone. I love The Town.
Mm,
He's definitely a great talent in that arena or that area. But Argo, I don't super love Argo. I don't understand why this is the one of the slate. That's not that would win. That's not to say that it didn't deserve any of its awards. It's not deserving necessarily of Best Picture. I didn't vibe with it like the most out of all of these. I think there's a lot more of these that I probably would have had win over it if it were up to me.
yeah.
But that all being said, I think it's a very well made film. I love the backing, the political backing of it, but then they don't focus because there's another film that we'll probably talk about last that's all politics. And this one is there's a political backing. It's kind of like Belfast. It's a political backing, but then there's just kind of another story happening. It's the
Mm,
people that are trying to go and save these people, and it's kind of like this like mission, like this kind of Mission Impossible kind of mission where they get the film crew, they talk about Hollywood, and then they go save these people, and then the end is really cool where it's like, are they going to get on the plane? Are they going to be able to stop this plane? Are they going to be able to take off? And then they take off, and then you're like, yeah, and it's like really triumphant moment. Very good crowd pleasing movie.
mhm.
Maybe not my favorite, but definitely an enjoyable watch. Very funny. Argo fuck yourself. There you go.
Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I think they dive more into the mission itself and the thrill and adventure rather than the actual political nature of it all. But
Mhm.
at a point, I kind of prefer that only because watching some of these other films that are more just like history lessons, I honestly
Yeah.
kind of prefer the more character based, like, like getting to know these different hostages as people and to see their own interaction, see how they grow and how they take on these roles. I kind of prefer seeing that more than like the discussions behind the scenes of, oh, how are we going to get them out? Making all those phone calls. I think
Yeah.
those are just two very different types of movies, and I just kind of prefer the other one. But I really do see what you're saying. Like, I think some of the other films are better depictions of actual history, and of course, historical accuracy. I don't always mind it unless I am very knowledgeable about the actual historical events, to where it bothers me. But here, I didn't really know this context, so I couldn't really be bothered by that stuff. But now reading back, there are a few things that I would have changed, like the fact that Ben Affleck is playing a person of color. Tony Mendez. Yeah,
It's not
Tony
like him
Mendez.
trying to play a,
Right.
a
Yeah, yeah,
Latino
yeah. He's not putting on
person.
like a
So
stereotype or anything when he's playing Tony Mendez, but they just wrote the character to be a white person, which, like, not the best choice. But I get if he was very passionate about this part and this role and this story. There is a lot of passion you could tell for this team
oh yeah.
because it's kind of like the unspoken heroes, and I think a lot of the time the government does get a lot more of the credit than the actual heroes of the mission got. And I like that they put that light on that group. I wish they gave a little bit more attention to the actual Canadian um, ambassador who helped house them and keep them, Victor Garber's role, because I think he was a much bigger figure in all this than the film depicts. But again, you have to take some sort of historical liberties. I didn't mind the ones they took because I do find it thrilling. And like you said, crowd pleasing. It is a crowd pleaser. And I think a lot of this slate of movies, in terms of my view of them, relates a lot to nostalgia and just being someone who was finally getting into more adult movies when I was 14 years old. And like, this was one of those movies I remember seeing and being like, I can't wait to see this big movie. Like, it's more of an adult movie. And my dad was like, "Ah, you might not really understand all of it, but try to vibe with it, try to get it. If you have any questions, you can whisper to me." But I was totally following, and I got really excited at the end when they finally take off, and then that last little bu- beat when the noise comes on the loudspeaker, and you think it's gonna be like, oh, we have to do an emergency landing, but instead she says, "You're free to walk about the cabin." And I just remember
Oh
feeling like that was like the magic of the movies at that age, because up till then I had only seen kind of movies for a younger audience. So movies like this and a few other movies that we'll talk about, like, were kind of that evolution of a film fan for me, and that's why I think I hold Argo so close to my heart. I do see its
yeah.
flaws 100%, and I personally wouldn't have picked it for Best Picture either, but I do think it is deserving of its win, and I am very happy that it did, especially because it does have that emotional resonance, just nostalgia for me.
I love just hearing like the personal stories of that connect people to certain films because
Yeah,
I don't have that connection to Argo, so I understand that's probably like while you would probably rank that one very highly, and I might rank another one highly because of similar reasons.
right.
I mentioned Manchester by the Sea, like Place Beyond the Pines. There's a lot of stuff for me that you can tell when I start a little bit later than you, I started to
Yeah,
develop more as a film fan and stuff. So there's other movies that definitely influenced me in the same kind of way,
yeah,
or similar kind of way. And then
cool.
also you mentioned the talk about Ben Affleck kind of like really caring about this film, which I think totally shows in the movie.
Yeah.
But also I remember like around this time, he was like going on like Bill Maher and like yelling at people about like Afghanistan and stuff like that.
Oh
So
wow.
I remember how passionate like he used
Yeah,
to be about this stuff. So, I think it
yeah,
showed in the movie. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
very good film.
Yeah, which brings us to, obviously to the big snub, and I think he should have been nominated for Best Director, especially if you're going to award it the best film. Even if people don't agree that it is the best film, if you're going to award something the best film, at least name it one of the top 5 directors, because I really do think, you know, the director is the one steering the ship, and it's like how are you going to award this as the best movie, but their director wasn't one of the best. You know what I mean?
To Denis Villeneuve anymore.
Yeah, right. Um, so Argo is nominated for 7 awards, wins three big ones. It wins Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. It is also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Alan Arkin, the only acting representative of the film, Best Original Score, Best Sound Editing, and Best Sound Mixing. A very big 3 wins. It was a pretty beastly night for Argo, if you will. Let's talk about some other beasts. Let's talk about Beasts of the Southern Wild. Why don't we?
Beasts of the Southern Wild, directed by Ben Zeitlin, written by Lucy Alibar and Ben Zeitlin, cinematography by Ben Richardson, music by Dan Romer and Ben Zeitlin, starring, oh my God, do you know how to say her name?
Kavenzane Wallace.
Okay, Dwight Henry, Gina Montana, and more. Synopsis. The film depicts the life of a subculture of people who live on an island in the Louisiana bayou called the Bathtub, based on Juicy and Delicious by Lucy Alibar.
Yep. And this actually had a similar story to something like Coda, where it premiered at Sundance very early 2012 and then kind of gained a little bit more traction and ended up being a Best Picture nominee. And I think that was one of the cool things about the expanding of the categories in 2009 is you can have some smaller films in there. But this particular smaller film, I have some thoughts on. Chad, what are your thoughts on this film? Because I know this was a first watch for you, so I want to hear your
Oh,
thoughts
yeah.
first before I dive into my thoughts.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, this was definitely a first watch for me. A little bit of it was hard to get through because there was a lot of like kind of like animal death and talk about animal death, and that's always very hard for me, even if they don't super like show it on screen or anything like that. But I do feel like it like held like a place. This actually a little bit kind of, and I'm just realizing this now, reminded me a little bit of kind of like a Terrence Malick type of
Okay.
like vibe to it because you had uh I forget what is her. You remember her character's name?
Hush Puppy, Hush Puppy.
Hush Puppy. So Hush Puppy's like narration is like throughout the film. It's like her experiencing nature in this place, the only place that she knows, and she's constantly like listening to the heartbeats of creatures and just things around her, just like experiencing life in her own way. But it's kind of reminded me a lot of the film that we got later, Room, where it's like this kid who's experiencing a lot of this stuff from just one perspective, and that's the narration that you're getting is from this little kid who's had a limited experience. So you can hear some of the thoughts, and you might have like an adult kind of interpretation of what she's saying, and you go like, okay, I gotta get like where she's living, what's going on. I don't think she has the healthiest like living conditions or stuff like that, but that's just how some people live, or some people have to based
Yeah,
on means and
right.
availability of resources and stuff like that. Very sad. And then also, I I didn't love the film or like totally, but I really, really started to like it like towards the end when you finally got to see like what the father was going through
Yeah,
because you kind of go like he's kind of irresponsible, but then you just see like they just live such a different life than like what you and I might live, that like it's just kind of a different way of going about things. So his in his mind, it's probably how he might have been raised too. He's like, I'm going to push her away and like leave her so that she doesn't have to see me slowly die. A little bit kind of like Amour, actually.
Yeah.
And then he's got to go because he's got something that's going to kill him. And then it's just, I just love the callback to like towards the beginning of the movie when she goes to listen to his heartbeat,
Mhm.
and just to talk about like life and you know, just your place in the world. I just felt like it was a really good meditation on a lot of that
Mhm.
as well. So I really enjoyed it, but it also was kind of a rough watch as well.
Yeah. It's interesting how you brought up the Terrence Malick comparison because I think a lot of people have mentioned that and do see the similarities, but I think the difference is also that Terrence Malick takes. It seems like his movies come out very spread. Like there's a lot of time between the releases of his movies. I think because he
Oh
really
yeah.
takes the time to really craft something completely, work of art like to where it doesn't even feel like a movie and it's so well thought out and the actual camera work is very deliberate and the narration is super deliberate. Here, it's interesting because Ben Zeitlin, this was his first film. And I think with a first film, you have to draw from your inspirations, and it's clear that there probably were some Malickian inspirations. But I think because of it's a first film, and because the actual nature of the film is so small, I think he gets a little carried away with all the camera work, the shaky cam, and the incredibly just in your face emotion of like the screaming and the crying, and it almost feels like he's trying too hard. And I think it's because, and we see this a lot with like debut filmmakers that they just come out the gate swinging so far that it almost distracts from the actual story being told because at its core, like you said, it is a very good story. It's got great morals, great themes, but I find it a little insufferable because of all the stuff he's doing with the camera, with the score and the dialogue and the sound design. It almost feels like just a little too much. It almost feels overkill to where it almost feels like I can't become emotionally invested because it's trying too hard to make me emotionally invested. Where some of these other films like Amour, like and some other films we'll talk about, they just develop naturally, and because of just the natural way it's going, it makes me feel things. It's not trying to make me feel anything. It just does by existing. And I think this is just something with a debut filmmaker. As time goes on, you kind of get more a sense of your style. You kind of iron out some of those issues. But I really think I think the debut nature of it all does show here. I just don't know if the camera work really justified itself in terms of the shakiness and the just jarring way it was shot. It really just took me out of it completely. And I do think Convenzine Wallace is putting in one of the best performances from a child actress. And it's a real shame because I think the rest of it just doesn't allow me to fully love her performance either, only because there's so much other stuff distracting for me. It's one of those things where I think the style got in the way of the substance. A lot of times people say this was too much style over substance in terms of like the style was great, but the substance wasn't there. I think the substance was there. The style kind of didn't do it any service for me. So I don't really care for this one. But I think that's just one of the things. 10 years later, he's made a few more films since, and I can even see him progressing as a filmmaker. So I definitely do think give it 10 more years, he could give us a real classic. He could kind of become a Malik in the terms of his like style, really ironing that out, figuring out his voice. But yeah, I really just don't care for this one. And I think amongst 9 films, there's gonna be one or two that just kind of fall by the wayside. And this was unfortunately the one that I just was like, yeah, I just couldn't really get into then, can't really get into now. And that's a shame because I really want to love it. Especially because of the leading performance. I think she's great. But yeah, I couldn't vibe with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I knew that, like, beforehand we were talking about movies that we didn't really vibe with. I knew you said there was one. I didn't expect this to be the one. So
Yeah.
very interesting. But yeah, I didn't. I don't know. Coming from a first watch, I think you're trying to get a gauge on what the story is, what's going
Yeah.
on. I think like the filmmaking a lot of the time takes a thing, but if it's something where you just kind of get the vibe, kind of a wrong vibe from it, and you're just like, I'm not enjoying this because of how it's shot or something else, you might be able to pick on first watch. But I think
Yeah.
because you've watched it more than once too, you've definitely dug
True.
into like,
Yeah.
I don't like this one that much. So
Yeah. Yeah.
fair.
But I do like its story. In terms of like its story in the awards season, like I like how it was a small film that kind of got more traction
Mhm.
and legs as it went on. I mean, that's the beauty of allowing such a big slate is you can get genre films in there. You can get films that are really small like this one. Even though I think Moonrise Kingdom was the much better small indie film.
Very
about
good.
about kids. But yeah, I like how we can have a French film or an Austrian film that has a French language. I like how we can fit a musical in there, a fantasy film, some historical epics, a rom com, and we can get a Sundance film. Like I like the variety, so for that reason, I do like it. But the movie itself, I don't particularly care for. Beasts of Southern Wild, the Academy did care for it enough to give it 4 nominations, but unfortunately did not care enough about it to give it any wins. But some of their nominations were pretty substantially historic. One being Kavenzane Wallace's Best Actress nomination, the youngest to ever do so. I believe she was 8 when she got nominated, which means she was probably 6 or 7 when she filmed it. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Ben Zeitlin, which was the big shock of the whole nominations, just because he was a first time director. No one really expected him to get a nomination over over Quentin Tarantino or Ben Affleck or what's her name? Oh my gosh, Catherine Bigelow. It was
Oh,
pretty much a big shocker when Ben Zeitlin got announced as the director nomination. But hey, pretty pretty big for his career. And then it was nominated for adapted screenplay. Um, one of the names I mentioned that didn't get nominated for Best Director is Quentin Tarantino, my favorite director. So it's time to talk about the first film I ever saw of Quentin Tarantino's, Django Unchained. Chad, tell us about
hell yeah.
it.
Django Unchained, directed by Quentin Tarantino, written by Quentin Tarantino, cinematography by Robert Richardson, starring Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kerry Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Walton Goggins, Dennis Christopher, James Remar, Bruce Dern, Quentin Tarantino, and more. Synopsis: a black slave named Django trains with the German bounty hunter with the ultimate goal of reuniting with his wife.
Yeah. Um, this, as I just said, was my first Tarantino movie. Like I was saying with Argo, this was the time where my dad was like, "All right, yep, you can go to see these older Best Picture nominees if you want, but you might not follow, you might not love it." I sat there, I said, "Oh, we'll see what this movie's about," and I left just being like mind blown, like, "Oh my god, what was that? That was crazy." And that's what started my Tarantino love, and I think it's very interesting that this is like the first because it is one of the most bloody, pulpy, but it's definitely a very noble vision in terms of genre. You know, it's a western, but it's also got this element of revenge slash love story of rescuing his love, Brunhilde. There's some great comedy in there as well. There's some really touching drama. There's some horror, and it's just kind of a amalgamation of all those things. And Quentin Tarantino's in it himself too. And he may just ruin that third act for me, but we'll talk about that a little later. Chad, what are your thoughts on Django Unchained? Because I kind of just showed my hand. I do love this movie. What do you think of Django Unchained?
Well, I was just gonna say, too, like, if you could just take Quentin Tarantino out, this may be a perfect movie. It's so good.
I
I
agree. I agree.
adore this movie so much. It's just a great time watching a movie. It's a longer one, but it's just so fun to watch. And it's like about like, old South slavery, all this stuff. They do not shy away from a certain racial slur in this
Yeah.
movie. They say it a thousand
Yeah,
times
but
almost
it
probably.
does make an effect. Like it does kind of
Yeah.
hammer home how evil and despicable some characters are, and
Yeah.
just what
It
is
is
worth fighting
not
for. Yeah,
it is not like Pulp Fiction where they just throw it in
yeah,
because
yeah.
no, it's actually used for a great purpose. And there are stories about how certain actors did not want to say the words, but that they're
Yeah,
like, you
and
have
that's
to.
fair. That's totally fair. Yeah,
Absolutely. But yeah, this is a very being about like slavery and stuff like that. I love how Quentin takes this and just makes it really fun and silly. It's almost like, a really great precursor to films we got later that we'll talk about later, like Jojo
mm,
Rabbit, where you can
yeah, yeah,
take, or even Life is Beautiful, where you can
yeah.
take a very serious subject, but actually make some like
Mm.
humor out of it and just make it very fun and silly, but also very crazy and brutal
Mhm.
at times.
Yeah, not
It's like,
shying away from the actual
no,
seriousness of it at the same time. It's a tricky balance. It really is tough to get that balance, and I think all three of those films you mentioned toe that line very well.
absolutely, yeah. And so, like, you get to go through this movie, and I just love how it picks up with, he's the slave, walking, being shepherded by, his masters or whatever, and then he gets freed by Christoph Waltz. And I love how Christoph basically just the way he operates and just talks to people, and he's
Yeah,
like, very professional. and it's like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to pay you. If I owe you money, I'm going to pay you, or you're going to pay me if you owe me money. And then like he like lets the slaves that are being there like basically like, you got two choices. You can go call this in, or you can like take matters into your own hands. Just stuff like that is just really great. Other comedy that I really love, I love the big, and it sounds weird, but I love the big KKK meeting that happens,
Mhm.
because it's basically all these people getting together, and it just shows how really dumb they are. Is they
Yeah.
get together and they're just fighting with each other about like, these masks don't fit.
Yeah.
The holes weren't cut right. Look, I'm not saying your wife didn't do a good job. I'm
Right.
just saying I can't wear this mask right now. And
It's
Jonah Hill
satire.
is
It's 100%
hilarious in this.
satire. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just love parts like that in movies, and this is kind of a great follow up to Inglorious Bastards, where you
Mhm.
get kind of like a revisionist history a little bit
Yeah.
of Django basically going from this, downtrodden, man that people don't even see as human, unfortunately, to being like this badass, like, gunslinger that killing everybody. And it's just so badass. I love everyone in this movie. I love Leo in this movie.
Yeah.
He is freaking next level
Yeah.
for me in
A big
this.
snub. Big snub. I don't understand it unless it was just that they didn't want to nominate two actors from the same movie in the same category, but they've done it since. So I don't understand that snub at all. I think that is one of the most egregious Oscar snubs in the last 10 years. It is really good performance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Leo basically like transforms in this movie into just one of the biggest monsters, and just the way he basically like kind of where he kind of like ad lib that whole story
Yep.
about how he wasn't supposed to cut himself. He did. He wipes it on Carrie's face, just chooses to
Yeah.
do all that, and Quentin let him do it, and just got a great,
Yeah.
fantastic scene as he's sitting there talking about how
Mhm.
certain people are inferior to him because of the shape of their skulls. And we get so much shit like that in the movie, mixed with the comedy and just the
Yeah.
action, and everything is just blended so well. I've been talking a lot, Dylan. How
Yeah,
about you go
I
a little
mean,
bit longer?
you could say Leo's character is the literal beast of the Southern Wild. But yeah, he is doing next level work. But the whole cast, Jamie Foxx, I love how he is so soft spoken, and he almost kind of has this really cool swagger about him, like when he's riding up on the horse with his new outfit, the costumes. Another nomination it didn't get that it should have was costume design. But Christoph Waltz is great. I know everyone thinks of him first and foremost in Glorious Bastards, but I don't think that necessarily diminishes this performance. I think this one is just as good, if probably not better, but just as good. And totally deserving of that win. I remember
Yeah.
just not knowing anything about him because I hadn't seen Inglorious. I hadn't seen any Tarantino stuff back then, so this was all just fresh and new to me. But like, you can get a sense from the very start that this is a Tarantino film because of what you said about the comedy and all that, but also at the end with the blood and the gold guts and gore. I mean, it really does go full Tarantino mode, but it is justified. It makes for such a great adrenaline rush because he is
Mhm.
taking vengeance out on all these people who wronged him. He's saving his wife. He's getting the girl at the end. He's giving her that big kiss. I just wish that 10-15 minutes with the Quentin Tarantino where he's tied up and where Django's tied up, and getting from the Candyland massacre to the ending where he does save his wife. I kind of wish we had just kind of just jumped right to it, like just have him blow up the mansion and take his wife away with him that night, rather than going, the next day he's chained up, he's about to get castrated, Quentin Tarantino gets him. Like that whole scene, it kind of just almost slows the momentum. And this movie is already long. There are scenes earlier on that when you rewatch, it's great, but there are some scenes where it does feel a little long. But as a first viewer, I loved watching all of it. But I think the more I watch it, the more I can be a little bit more critical of it because it is so good, and I want to like love every ounce of it. But I don't. But the parts that I love about it are just so good. Like you said, it's just such a good movie, craft wise, entertainment wise, especially entertainment wise, because it is taking such a serious subject matter, but doing something so innovative and unique and fresh with it, to where you still get the point too. And I think that's one of the things that could be lost if it's not a complete satire or a complete historical accuracy depiction of history. This is somewhere in the middle where it's kind of genre bending the truth in history, but it all works so well together. And I think Quentin Tarantino, this is probably one of his best screenplays ever, if not his best, and he wins for it very deservingly so. I think it's a really, really well done film, and it's obviously one of the most rewatchable because I watch it probably once a year. I really love this movie.
Nice. It's a great film, and three parts that I wanted to, because we could probably talk about this for a long time, but we got
Yeah,
so
for
many
sure.
other movies to cover. But three parts that I absolutely love. When you're talking about Christoph Waltz, it reminded me of like not the very beginning, but almost the beginning when he goes and he just up and shoots the sheriff of a
Yeah,
town, and
yeah,
then like he has to like sit there and explain not only why that was just of him to do that, but why the town owes him money
yeah,
now. And they're all just freaked out and people are fainting. I just love that part so much. And also, Django gets to like try probably his first beer ever. I'm sure. And just seeing that moment is amazing. I
yeah.
love the say bye to Miss Laura, and then shoots her and she just flies across the room. Like what? It's
Yeah.
just so insane. Oh man, there was another one that I love, but I am not pulling it, so we can move on.
Yeah, if you think about it later when we bring up our actors and actresses, if you want to slip it in there, even if you don't pick one of the actors and actresses, if you remember there for our ranking, you can bring it up.
Oh, I do
Yes.
remember.
Oh, he remembers it.
It was the moment when Django basically takes it upon himself to because he's a bounty hunter now. He finds the two guys and he just starts whipping the shit out of them, and it's just
Yeah.
great to see that like reverse of a black man just like whipping the shit out of like some white like
Yep.
slave owners, and that just have no mercy on people and just just are terrible human beings.
Mhm.
And then he goes and kills them too, and it's
Yeah.
pretty, you know, I don't
Yeah. I mean,
condone
great
murder,
story.
but it's
No.
pretty satisfying either
Yeah,
way.
you can feel the anger of history throughout every frame of this. And at its
Yes,
core, I think it is a love story. It is him getting back to his love and saving his love. But really, every weave of that love story, everything that sews it together is just a mix of vengeance and revenge and hate and how Quentin Tarantino approaches it is actually rather professional, I think, in terms of like, trying to understand the black experience and just slavery because you don't have to be black to understand just that it was bad. You
right.
obviously can't understand every ounce of that perspective if you are not directly living in that those shoes, that skin. But um, I think Quentin Tarantino does his best that he can as a white man making a film about slavery, about race tensions and all that stuff. It is some of his best work, I think, in terms of research and in that sense as well.
Love everything you just said. I just wanted to add one more thing. I think I heard a story about how he actually went to like Georgia or somewhere to film this. I probably got the state wrong,
Yeah,
but he like created like so many like jobs. It was like such a big like
yeah,
thing in the area that he was at. I just thought that was
hmm
a really good story to say. He like
right,
employed a lot of like local people. It's
good.
really cool to hear
Yeah,
about.
that's always great. Django Unchained nominated only for 5 nominations, which was actually pretty surprising, but it wins 2 of them. It was nominated for Best Picture, Sound Editing, and Cinematography, but it wins for Best Original Screenplay for Quentin Tarantino, his second, I believe, since Pulp Fiction, and Best Supporting Actor for Christoph Waltz, his second after Inglourious Bastards. So it was not a miserable day for the Django Unchained crew for winning those 2 Oscars, but it might have been a miserable day or a miserable day for those miserable in France for Les Miserables. Chad, let's hear about Les Mis.
Absolutely. Les Miserables, right? Directed by Tom Hooper, written by William Nicholson, Alain Boublil, Claude Michel Schoenberg, and Herbert Kretzmer.
Nice.
Cinematography by Danny Cohen. Music by Claude Michel Schoenberg. Starring Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Anne Hathaway, Amanda Seyfried, Eddie Redmayne, Helena Bonham Carter, Samantha Barks, Aaron
Tveit.
Tveit,
Hmm.
Tveit, Daniel Huddlestone, and more. Synopsis: a man on the run from the law decides to care for a factory worker's daughter, based on Les Miserables, the musical by Alan Boublil and Claude Michel Schoenberg, and Les Miserables, book by Victor Hugo.
Yes. So yeah, based on the musical that is based on the book, there have been so many different versions of Les Mis, just like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
versions of Beauty and the Beast and so many versions of all these things. So yeah, a classic piece of literature made into a musical, now made into a musical movie. Chad, I have a feeling I know what your thoughts may be on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts because we have not really talked too much about this movie. Another one that again falls into the Django Argo category of just monumental films for myself at that age in terms
Mm-hmm.
of a theater going experience. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as someone just also asking, what was your familiarity maybe with the book or the musical before seeing this? Was this your first introduction to it? I'd love to know.
Yeah, exactly. I had gone like my whole life hearing Les Miserables, and like hearing, that name, but I
Yeah,
never understood or known the story at all, and never tried to read the book.
yeah.
Like, my wife has, and apparently it's like a freaking like Stephen
It's
King, The
long. Yeah,
Stand unabridged,
yeah,
1,500 pages book where they talk about like
yeah,
aqueducts and stuff like that.
yeah.
But yeah, like, no, I haven't read the book. I haven't seen the musical. That's not this film. This is my
Nice.
only thing. So
Ah,
I was actually
okay.
asking a lot of questions to my wife about this, because
The
I was
source
like,
material. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, what is the source material? Because honestly, I didn't get a lot of the story that she told me from this film.
Hmm.
And I'm not
Okay.
going to go too negative, because I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
you and a lot of people do like this, but I don't like this movie like at all. I
Oh, okay.
don't think
Cool.
it's a very good movie. And I think honestly, and this, I don't know if this is controversial at all, but I think Tom Hooper shows his kind of cards when he comes out with Cats. I think this movie kind of got maybe lost in the hype, or people, because Cats is not like that, like well, like revered of a
Hmm.
musical. Like, it's
Yeah.
not one that people go, this is one of the greatest musicals ever made. I think Les Mis might be more of that. So I think
Yeah.
maybe that propped this movie up a little more. But I
Hmm.
don't think the story in this movie, I think maybe the movie trying to adapt a musical that adapted from a book may have gotten a little bit lost
Yeah.
in this film a little bit, because like, if you just like kind of take pieces of this, where you look at Anne Hathaway's character, and she's like this factory worker, and then
Hmm.
she goes to being like this downtrodden sex worker
Hmm.
who is dying and stuff like that, and that happens, I think, in like a 15-minute time span.
Mm.
And you
Yeah.
don't, and I know they're like, okay, well, we got to get to the daughter. Daughter's got to be older. She's going to be Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah.
We got to get there. But
Yeah.
like, I feel like we don't spend any time on her, and then
Right.
all of her story has to be thrown at us in one song, which is a very good song. It's probably the best part of the movie.
Hmm.
But, and I think Anne Hathaway does a good job.
Yeah.
But I also just feel like something gets lost there with the character arcs. Like the one girl who or woman, whatever, is trying to, who loves Eddie Redmayne's
Yeah.
character.
Eponine. Yeah.
She's Ebony. She falls in love with him. She gets kind of rejected a little bit, even though I don't think
Yeah.
he really knows that she loves him. She sings about how she's sad that she can't be with him, and then she dies. He doesn't carry her away. Someone else does, and he just like reads a book or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this. They don't even really care about their own characters in this
Mm.
movie. The one dude stole a piece of bread or something like
Yeah.
that, and the rest of
Yep.
the movie he's running away because he stole bread.
Yeah.
It just
Well.
doesn't make much
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah, well,
And
and
okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
this is a valid point. No, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because I think this is a very poor adaptation of an almost flawless source material. In the fact that I think the musical Les Mis, the stage musical, is one of the greatest pieces of art ever constructed. Watching this movie, having known the musical, there are some cuts that are made, and they're not cuts that are like big chunks of things, but just like one-liners here and there. And these are like the whole show is sung. There's very little dialogue. And when you take away one or two lines, first off, some stuff doesn't rhyme anymore. Some stuff just feels incomplete. It was a weird way of adapting it. So I think this is one of the worst screenplays, probably the worst screenplay of the bunch, because I think the choices of what to cut and what to add, they take away so much stuff so they can add a new song for Hugh Jackman to sing solely to get a best song nomination. The one where he sings to her in,
Oh.
in the wagon suddenly, where he's just singing to her. That was added because they wanted another nomination, and it worked. It got nominated, but like for me, it's tough because yeah, the people who love Les Mis, I think, are going to go into this and enjoy it because they love the songs that are in their whole. The performances, they do feel true to the source material of the characters. Like I think Sacha Baron Cohen was perfectly cast as Thenardier. Samantha Barks, a really good Eponine. Yeah, like Eddie Redmayne really fits the role of Marius. Aaron Tveit is actually a really good Enjolras, and I think Aaron Tveit and Samantha Barks are probably the two less known people in the cast, and I think they're probably my two highlights. Enjolras being the leader of the army. Aaron Tveit actually just won his first Tony last year for playing the lead in Moulin Rouge on Broadway, which is really great.
Oh.
And Samantha Sparks, who played the role of Ebony and then was brought into the movie to do it. I think they're probably the two standouts, along with Anne Hathaway. But it really is, at its core, Jean Valjean's story. As you said, he steals a loaf of bread and has to serve his time on a chain gang. But in reality, he stole the loaf of bread to feed his sister's son, his nephew. So he is well intentioned and good hearted. But this one police officer, Javert, will not stand until Jean Valjean. He sees that justice is done. Jean Valjean basically escapes the chain gang. He's on parole, breaks his parole, tries to steal from a bishop, who then, instead of turning him in, decides to tell him, hey, listen, you can live a better life if you just live responsibly and don't resort to criminality. And that's when he decides to turn his life around. 10 years later, he becomes a mayor. He helps this one woman by basically adopting her child from her, and then from these evil people, the Thénardiers. And then when she is older, he makes sure that she grows up with a loving parent in a home. And when he finds out from this letter that her love is about to die in war, he goes to the war and volunteers himself in war just to make sure that this man is safe, so he can give his daughter a beautiful life with her husband.
That's a
That is a
very
basic.
Jack. It's
Yeah,
a very Jack Pearson thing to do,
yeah,
by the way.
that is, yeah, and that's the thing. This is a very that's a very basic premise of Les Mis, but I think, like you've said, it gets a little lost in what they decide to cut from this and what they decide to do, because with all the cuts they make, it does feel a little rushed. It does feel a little fragmented, whereas the musical flows just so much nicer. Sure, Fantine is only in about 20 minutes of the musical too, but it just seems like she's given more of an arc in the musical because she has a fuller scene. The actual death scene has a lot more weight to it too in the musical. Like I think, like I said, the people who like the music and love the show will enjoy it because they know what's going on. But if someone who doesn't know what's going on watches this, I don't know if they're going to get the best representation of the story. And it's a shame, because I know you, and I know you love a good redemption story, kind of like a Shawshank, where someone is a prisoner and
Oh,
redeems
yeah.
themselves. That's what this is. It's about Jean
Ah,
Valjean basically redeeming himself. He becomes this mayor, saves this woman's daughter after she dies, raises Cosette, saves the Marius, Eddie Redmayne's character, from the barricade, and basically lives to it gets very old, so he can make sure that Cosette lives and
ah.
ends up in the right arms of this guy and make sure that she's well off. And the tragedy is that Javert, this police officer, wants nothing more than to put this man behind bars, but he can't seem to do it because this guy does do so much good. Like, he does spare his life when he's caught as because he's a spy. Javert, the police inspector, he is a spy, and he's sent to die. But Hugh Jackman, Javert or Valjean, spares his life, and then later on, when he's carrying Marius out of the sewers, Javert can kill him there, but he decides not to, and it's because he realizes that Valjean has changed and that he is a good man and that he can't kill him because he realizes that he's a more evil man than he ever thought Valjean would be. And it's a really interesting dynamic that I think is done so well on stage, because you have this, you know, inner turmoil of Javert's mind of, am I going to try to go by the law and get this man that I know is bad behind bars, but he's also a good man now, and he's actually giving me no reason to believe that he should be behind bars. And it's a really interesting turmoil that ends in him, committing suicide. It's a sad event, and it just doesn't come across on screen as well. And I totally get what you're saying. It just doesn't translate as well to the screen. I also don't know if Russell Crowe was the best choice for Javert. I really don't think he was. That
Bad
role
singing,
is
yeah.
a yeah. He doesn't sing it well, but because I really do love that story. That's why I wanted to give a little bit of a synopsis, because it is this ultimate redemption story. It's this prisoner who was only in prison because he stole bread to feed his nephew. Like, it was a good deed that he ends up being in prison for, and basically spends his whole life trying to repay. To where when he finally dies, Fantine's like, "You've earned this. You can like live now in peace." And he, goes to heaven. And I'm not a super religious person, but I think there's a beauty in that last scene where he is with all those people that fought and died, and he realizes the
Poetic,
sacrifices
yeah.
he's made. It's a really, really great story that I feel like I agree it was not given the best adaptation. That being said, I know I've talked for a while, so I'll stop soon. But I think while it was not a great adaptation, because I love the source material so much, I still love watching it. And I think that's just a matter of just loving what this musical was, and just being like, oh, there's that song I love to hear. Or, oh, wow, like she's singing the hell out of I Dreamed a Dream. A beautiful performance that got her an Oscar, Anne Hathaway. And I think those things do kind of bring it back up for me, because it brings me back to the times where I've been in the show. I've been in the show 3 times. It was one of my first
Oh,
roles. I played Gavroche when I was 10 years old. I was one of my first roles. I got to die on the
ooh.
barricade. He's an annoying in this movie, but he's not an
Yes.
annoying character, I promise. But then I got to play one of the students at the barricade when I was older, and then I got to play Valjean in high school. So this
Oh.
musical means a lot to me, and this story means a lot to me. And I do agree, it is not a great film adaptation, but I think because I love the musical so much, I still prefer it over some of these other films because I just enjoy the story, and I can fill in the blanks because I know them. But as someone who doesn't know the blanks, it's hard to fill them in when the movie doesn't really give a ton. So I totally get where you're coming from. That's my piece on Les Mis. It's very hard to talk about this movie because this was like the theater kids Avengers coming, growing up, being like, let's all go see Les Mis. I saw it like 4 times in theaters because it was like the movie that all the theater kids wanted to see. So I have a fondness for the actual experience, seeing the movie and then performing in the show. But I agree. I think the movie, especially 10 years later, watching it back, it's aged a little poorly, and I'm able to recognize the flaws a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you explained all that, because it shows that you love this, and
Yeah,
that's why I tried not to be like too negative about
yeah,
like the musical in general, like the
yeah,
musical outside of the film and the book and the source material, because I know it's important to a lot of people. Everyone talks about it.
yeah,
It's just one of the classic stories, and I think that's exactly what you said is like the story and the characters and just like all everything with them is what kind of got lost a little bit in this
yeah,
adaptation.
for sure.
And because of that, I think unless you exactly what you said, like can connect to it on a different level from other experiences, then you can't really connect with it. Or maybe you can, I don't know,
Yeah,
but I didn't personally connect with any of the characters in this because I just don't think it was well executed. And
yeah,
we both
that's
kind of
fair.
mirror that sentiment
Yeah, yeah,
quite a bit. And even still, like I was for because I know you say you love the music in this. Part of me when I was watching this, I know that a lot of people had about the film that came out last year, Cyrano.
mhm,
It was a lot of people were saying like, I think this movie would have been better without the music. That's kind of like because it felt like they were like tiptoeing a little bit. I'm like,
right.
if the musical is like all music, like they sing everything, you're talking
Yeah,
about like they rhyme a lot and it flows
mhm,
super well. If you can't do that in the movie, why make it a musical at
yeah,
all and just make us the book wasn't a musical. You could have
right.
just did like a
Yeah.
regular
Yeah, and
adaptation.
there are about
But
like 5 or 6 versions out there that are just adaptations of the book, like the Liam Neeson Jeffrey Rush one that Malcolm was talking about last month.
right, right.
Is a more straightforward adaptation, and that, I'd probably recommend that for people like you who didn't really get a good grasp of the actual story, because I know you, Chad, and I know you love a good redemption arc like that, like
Yeah.
the prisoner, like the Andy Dufresne thing, like it kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of that. Jean
I kind
Valjean
of want to
story.
actually go ahead and check out the musical
Yeah,
at some point if it's like
yeah,
online or the
mhm,
musical streaming service or somewhere because
yeah,
that could be
yeah.
a different mind changing experience
Yeah,
for me.
yeah, but and I like how you brought up Cats too, because I think the difference between the two is that I think they're both really bad adaptations of one. The problem is Les Mis is a bad adaptation of a good source material, whereas Cats is a bad adaptation of a bad source material. So Les Mis is always going to probably play a little bit better. But do you prefer
Mhm.
Cats to this, or do you still like this movie?
No.
Okay,
I don't wanna watch Les Mis ever again if I can help it, but if someone gave me the choice gun to head, it's Les Mis every day because
okay,
Cats is misery. That was
gotcha.
just like a nightmare to
Cats
watch.
is Miserable. Anyway, Les Mis,
Yes.
Les Mis nominated for 8 nominations. It was very widely praised in terms of nominations. It only wins 3. It wins for supporting actress for Anne Hathaway, and I think justifiably. I mean, her time was coming, and she does give a great performance, even if it's short lived. Sound mixing, which also makes sense. It's a musical; they have to mix all the voices together. Makeup and hairstyling, again, making Hugh Jackman age pretty impressive. It is also nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Hugh Jackman, Best Original Song for Suddenly, the worst original song ever, production design and costume design. Yeah, so Chad could say he was watching Les Mis. He felt like he was on a boat without a paddle. Speaking of, let's talk about another shipwreck story. Let's talk about Life of Pi.
Life of Pi, directed by Ang Lee, written by David McGee, cinematography by Claudio Miranda, music by Michael Dana, starring Suraj Sharma, Irfan Khan, Rafe Spall, Taboo, Adil Hussein, and more. Synopsis: a boy and a tiger named Richard Parker survive a shipwreck and attempt to make it back to land, or so we thought. Based on Life of Pi by Yan Martel.
Yeah. Um, this movie, of all these movies, some of them got worse, some of them got better. This one would have been 6, 7, 8 on my list. Rewatching this, I'm a huge fan. I love this movie, and I don't know why I didn't before. I think it was because when I first watched it, I was at the age, because I watched this in 2012, but I still wasn't, I'm not a hugely religious person, and this is a very religious film. But watching it now, with a little bit more experience in life, I'm able to appreciate this film so much more, and I don't know why that is. I just really resonated with this one. I freaking love it. I think it's gorgeous. It's a technical masterpiece. I think every single visual effect holds up so well now, which can't be said for a lot of those movies coming out at that time that were trying to be visually innovative. Like, I think this one holds up so well. And I just love, even if I can't connect to the religious stuff, I love the use of just, a fighting spirit and having something to fight for, and just the survival aspect and giving your every ounce to try to, like, survive, and what happens when you're at your lowest, and what you go toward, and also using storytelling as a way of therapy, and as a way of, connection between humans, and just the animals. I mean, it's sad what happens to some of the animals, and that stuff does bump it down for me still. But wow, like, the visuals, and then just the different animals, and the way it all just comes together. I love this movie. Chad, tell me, because you probably have more concise thoughts since you've always loved this movie. What are your thoughts on Life of Pi?
Well, I love that you began with the technical, because it is
Yeah,
such a great technical marvel, I feel like. And I loved so many of the visuals. I'm not sure if you mentioned the score, but the
that too.
score
Yeah,
was
beautiful.
phenomenal. Oh
Yeah,
my
Michael
God, just
Dana's score. Ooh.
so great. Yeah, but like, yeah, it's interesting because I came from, I don't know if I've always loved it. I liked it a lot, but I had kind of questions back when I
Mhm.
first saw it, when it first came out. I have a different kind of experience with like religious stuff. I've been
Yeah.
super religious. I've been not so, more of an agnostic kind of like right now, but that besides the point. I think anyone can watch this film, just like you
Yes.
said, even if you're not religious, and kind of like, because it's not that the movie's telling you you have to be religious, you have to do this, you have to pray to God. It's just a very important aspect of the character's life,
Yeah.
and it's shown really well. The animal, I just don't want to touch on the animal like stuff,
Mhm.
because there are a lot of like stuff that I just like. Okay, if you can get past that part that I do not
Yeah.
like, but I'll just even skip past that part. I'll get to the rest. That part I think does drag it down maybe like 1 point, but like it's
Yeah.
such a great movie, it doesn't really matter. I
Mhm.
also love this movie quite a bit now. This rewatch did the same thing it did for you. I don't know if it was that low for me from before, but now it's definitely probably right around like where you have it, I'm sure. I absolutely love, and I actually started reading the book via audiobook a little bit, and there's a lot more like animal stuff in the book that I'm like, okay, skip to the next chapter, because
Yeah.
I don't like to hear about like
Mhm.
animal abuse stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
and not just the actual animal and animal violence, but just seeing, like, a zebra swimming through the water, like, that I was watching with my mom, and just my heart
mhm,
sank. Like, that whole shipwreck sequence, I think, is the most impressive culmination of
yes,
visual effects in that whole movie, and it does get even more beautiful to the eye, but, like, in terms of just the mixing of sound and visuals and set and acting and score, like, that moment, the shipwreck, it's the best since Titanic. Like, it really is just such a
mhm,
really great shipwreck sequence. I think everything before that is just like, "Okay, it's fine," like, we're getting a little bit of exposition setup, but, like, once that shipwreck sequence hits to the end, I'm like, it was just
absolutely.
flawless. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I love the shot about that part. Love the shot when he first gets into the water and he like swims away because he's
yeah.
being attacked by the tiger, and you just see the shipwreck. And it's like it's a
Oh,
shipwreck, but it's gorgeous. So like, how
yeah.
do you make something so terrible look so
Yeah, I don't know.
great?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a beautiful shot. But and this movie's filled with that. But yeah, I love just like, it's kind of like Castaway a little bit, where it's like, there's just this guy and his tiger, not his tiger, but the tiger, Richard Parker, just kind of them learning to live together, him trying to have the tiger not eat him, also find ways to find food. You would think a lot of that would just get boring, but it's just really kind of fascinating to see him, not lose his mind, talk about, entertaining himself, just talking about all the things you might not think about if you were like actually shipwrecked,
Yeah.
learning how to conserve water, gather rainwater because you can't drink the ocean water. But not only that, but I love how it got into deep into the, like the fantasy stuff, because you can kind of like buy you can buy that there is a boy or man on a ship, or not a ship, but a
A boat.
lifeboat
Yep.
with a tiger, and him trying to like not train the tiger, but like get it to not eat him,
Coexist. Yeah.
coexist with the tiger. I love that he didn't become like a pet tiger or anything
Yeah.
like that. He was always this force of
Mhm.
nature that man was just
Yeah.
trying to cohabitate with
Yeah. And
while
that's
they
yeah.
both needed each other.
And that's what makes that last moment where he's like, he didn't look back at me. Like, it makes it almost kind of heartbreaking because, like, while he isn't
Yes.
his pet, there's a kind of a bond that forms. But then you have to remind yourself that it is just a force of nature at the end of the day, and that's what is almost tragic about it. Um,
Yeah.
but I like how you
He's
said, like, it's hard to buy sometimes because I think even at the end, like, when you hear, like, him give that other story to the police officers and stuff and, like, kinda, like, telling a different story and then being like, "Well, which one do you believe? Which one do you like more?" Like, I like that idea because it can, win over the people who are like, "That doesn't seem realistic," but it can also, aid the people who are like, "I love that fantasy element and the fiction," because it can kind of coexist, best of both worlds. It can be whatever you really make of it. And I think that's the beauty of storytelling itself and the beauty of this film is that it can kind of leave a little bit to interpretation also with just the form of storytelling and what is truth and what is fiction and what is a coping mechanism, what is the truth that he actually tells versus what he's fictionalizing.
And I think that at its core, what you just brought up there. Well, first, I want to say I love that he said he just left me so unceremoniously. It's
Yeah.
just a great way to say that. But yeah, I love that part of the movie because when I first saw it, that's the one where I went like, "What? Like, none of that happened? What?" And like here, I actually love that about this movie. I think that really shows why this movie is so great because then he tells the different story and then he gives you the choice. And I think that's exactly what it's like to live,
Yeah.
to see a world that seems so like unforgiving and barbaric at times, but also so beautiful. You can almost believe in things like, metaphysical stuff like ghosts and,
Hmm.
maybe a God out there, or, some people are just like, nope, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
There are different types of people, and some people just are like, I don't need to know how everything works. I just want, to, have this belief that I have. And it could be real, it could be not. I don't know, but that's kind of a meditation on
Yeah.
religion and spirituality. And you, for yourself, you think, is everything you're experiencing real, or is this all just like a dream? You don't really know because we're just people. But like, I love how this movie lets you kind of decide, and it's like, which story do you prefer? Do
Yeah.
you prefer this one that's kind of brutal and scary and sad? Or do you prefer the one where it's kind of fantastical and there's an
Yeah.
island that eats people
Yeah.
and you find teeth and and
Yeah.
leaves and
Yeah.
stuff like that?
Yeah. And one more note on this film before we move on. Irfan Khan's performance. I know he's not in a ton of it, but and rest in peace. He passed away a few years ago. But that moment where he's talking about Richard Parker, walking away, and those tears kind of roll down his cheek. I mean, that's some of the best acting in this movie, and I'm really glad that that made such an impact on me. I would have nominated him for supporting actor. I think he's really, really good in this. And the young guy who plays Young Pie. Oh, what is his name? I'm blanking on it. Suraj Sharma. Really, really
He's
great
seen.
as well. Yeah. Piscine.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Are
a
you
really, really strong
PC?
film. And the Academy agreed because it was the most awarded film of the day with 4 wins. Doesn't seem like a lot, but still, 4 is a lot compared to the others. It wins for Best Director for Ang Lee, which was not set in stone until Ben Affleck got snubbed of the nomination. Then it was smooth sailing for Ang Lee to get his second Best Director win after Brokeback Mountain. It was also the winner
Deserved.
of Best Original Score for Michael Donna, Best Cinematography, well deserved, and Best Visual Effects, duh. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Song for Pies the Lullaby, also written by Michael Donna, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, Best Production Design, and Best Editing. Wow. Really one of the goats when it comes to technical movies and just the actual use of CGI and visual effects. Speaking of goats, one of the presidents that some might consider the goat, the greatest of all time in the presidency, directed by one of the goats of cinema, starring the goat of actors, composed by the goat of composers, and shot by perhaps maybe the top 5 goat cinematographers. It is Lincoln. Chad, tell us about Lincoln.
Okay. Yeah, one of the most baller
Yes.
presidents ever,
I
Lincoln.
said perhaps for all the goats. I mean, your goats can
Directed.
be whoever they want to be, but sometimes these people making this movie were regarded as the goats. That's all.
Directed by Steven Spielberg, the GOAT, right?
Maybe the goat.
Written by Tony Kushner. Cinematography by Janice Kaminsky. Music by the great John Williams.
Maybe the goat.
Starring Daniel Day-Lewis, Sally Field, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Adam Driver, Jared Harris, David Oyelowo, Lucas Haas, Dane DeHaan, David Strathairn, Jeremy Strong, Tommy Lee Jones, Lee Pace, Ronan the Accuser himself, Michael Stuhlbarg, Bolton Goggins, Hal Holbrook, James Bader, Tim Blake Nelson, Jackie Earl Haley, and more. Yes, more, apparently.
Yeah.
Synopsis. This film covers the final 4 months of Abraham Lincoln's life while he was trying to pass the 13th Amendment, based on Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Yeah. That cast, whew, I mean, talk about stacked on paper. Wow. Yeah, really good cast. So we've talked about a few like historical films on this on the show. Another one about a president, Wilson. Um, Now we have Lincoln. This is interesting because most biopics cover a whole life. This one is covering a very small part of someone's life, up until the most dramatic part of his life, which was not even shown really in this film. Um, that is, for some people, a plus, some people a negative. Chad, what do you think of this film as a showcase of Lincoln's life as a biopic and just as a movie itself? What do you think?
Yeah, I remember seeing this. I thought before it was really slow and just kind of dragged. This time, I did not agree with what I
Mm,
just said. I really love this movie. I think it's great. I love the choice that they didn't. It's not Abraham Lincoln where they go from him living in a log cabin and
right.
just going. I love that they didn't do that. They just focused on not saying that his whole life isn't important, but this very important thing, one of his greatest accomplishments, and something that we get to see the benefits of, coming to fruition today with advancements in equality and stuff like that, and just something that everybody loves, but not everyone did love then. And I love that they have like the divisiveness of this bill at the time. Just like how everyone's just yelling at each other. I love how they they show like Congress in action in this. I feel like just like kind of like honing in on that being like one of the, it feels just kind of like a courtroom drama
Yeah.
almost. And I
Yeah.
and I love that aspect of it. That's one of my favorite kind of like types of movies, because it's just so interesting to hear people speak about their beliefs back and forth, back and forth. I just think it's great to have discussions like that. And I think there's obviously some people who are just on the wrong side of history, to be blunt.
Yeah.
And then some people who are on the right side of history. And it's great to see people like Tommy Lee Jones be so freaking blunt about his opinions,
Yeah.
calling people names and just
Yeah.
being like that guy, but like for good. Because you
Mhm.
see so many of those people be that guy, but for bad
Yeah.
reasons. But this guy's just like, you are the worst, something. And it's just so great. He will still always be like Two-Face to me because that was my first, sight of
Yeah.
him. But
Yeah.
so I always hear Two-Face when I hear him yelling at people. But yeah, I do think a little bit, because I know people say John Williams is the GOAT. My John Williams will always be like Harry Potter and Home Alone.
Yeah.
But um, the Spielberg stuff is kind of weird sometimes with John Williams. I
Mm.
don't like the horns.
Huh,
I
okay.
think the horns, because it's interesting to go back to Saving Private Ryan from last time. I
Yeah.
think sometimes the horns kind of make it feel a little more cheesy than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I can kind of tell that this is a movie now
Yeah.
instead of.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
It's
sorry.
interesting. It's just interesting because like you have so many talented names attached. Like Daniel Day Lewis, some consider the goat of acting. Steven Spielberg, some consider the goat of directing. John Williams, some consider the goat of composing. Janusz Kaminski,
Mhm.
some people consider the goat of cinematography. Tony Kushner, goat of writing. But somehow, th- and they are still giving the best of themselves. But it's like I something about this movie I just do not always absorb, and I think it's because it is more of a courtroom drama, and I think I like that about it, that it did pick such a specific direction to go toward, but at the same time, I wish there was a little bit more of him in his personal life to offset the meetings and the men sitting around a table talking. I think what they're talking about is so important and it's very timely, especially today. But I just wish there was a little bit more of him with his family because I think that relationship with Sally Field is so different and unique to what we see with a lot of other presidential relationships. Um, for better or worse. And then, of course, the stuff with him, like talking to these black people, these slaves who were freed. Like I love the scene where he's talking to David Oyelowo's character and like talking to the slaves in the battle scene, in like on the battleground, and like they can recite the Gettysburg Address to him. Like I really, really like that. I just wish there was a little bit more of him, like giving him a little bit more of a character, not necessarily backstory. Like I agree, you don't need to go back to the cabin, but like just a little bit more of him just in his social life to then like balance out the meetings and the political stuff. And I get it, it's a political film, and it's all history. And this is almost one of those things where like Argo seems like it's lacking a little bit of the history, but it's more entertaining to me. Whereas here, I think it's almost so historically accurate, but it didn't entertain me as much as like something like Argo. So I think it's one of those things where I think I just wish there was a more perfect balance between entertainment and actual context and historical nature. Because I think Daniel Day Lewis, he is giving a great performance, and I think this is one of the most accurate depictions of Lincoln. And we don't know what Lincoln really sounded like or what he was like, but hearing what Daniel Day Lewis did with researching him and trying to master that voice, that physicality, it feels like you're watching Abraham Lincoln. I never once thought, oh, that's Daniel Day Lewis, and I think that's a testament to the makeup team, which is somehow the thing that it didn't get nominated for was makeup. And I'm like, how? Because they make him look
Mhm.
and just transform into this character. And I know he's a method actor, but like he really does fully transform to where I want to love this movie more. But I think it's just like, it's just not my cup of tea in terms of the actual style of it. That being said, the contents of what it's talking about is so important, so timely, so topical. And I do appreciate this film more than I love it. And I do think everyone's doing a great job with it. But that's an interesting point about John Williams. I'll have to think about that when I listen to it again, because I don't think this is one of his best scores, but I haven't really noticed it in a negative light either. So, yeah, it just didn't entirely click for me. But I think it's just because of the nature of this film, rather than the actual, filmmaking itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't mean to like go too negative. I think if I actually paid a lot of attention to the John Williams score,
Yeah.
it's probably great. It's just like sometimes the horns were just a little on the
Yeah.
nose a little bit. But that was like my only kind of big criticism from the movie, because everything else I pretty much love. I
Great.
loved hearing your criticism about, maybe, diving a little bit more into his personal life. I think could have been a great addition to the movie. I don't think I ultimately really needed that either, because we did get a lot of like great scenes between
Yeah.
him and Mrs. Lincoln, Sally Field. She was great in the film. And also we just kind of generally through like osmosis just kind of know stuff about Lincoln, I think. So
True.
you don't really need to hammer home on that, but you don't. You also have a great point, I think, there as well. And perhaps it could have been an even stronger film with that. But I think my enjoyment didn't suffer from that
Yeah.
either. I
Fair.
think I might have enjoyed this one a little more than you did.
Yeah, definitely. It might
Oh,
have been
and
interesting.
the
Oh, I was just
just the
along that point though.
scenes.
Along that point, I
Okay.
just want to say it might have been really interesting to see maybe if this was a mini series, kind of like what they did with John Adams with the Paul
Yes,
Giamatti. Like maybe just make it longer so that way you can add more stuff without taking away. Because I don't think anything should be
that's a
taken
great
away
point.
from this. I think if anything, stuff should be added, and it's already 2.5 hours. You know what I mean? So
Right.
so
That's a great point, Dylan. I like that point a lot. But I just wanted to add that, yeah, what you said about Daniel Day in this movie, or Daniel Day Lewis in this movie, like he was nothing like Daniel Plainview, but he was also Daniel Plainview
yeah,
at one point. But
and in
he
a
was
few
nothing
months
like that
we'll
guy.
look at Billy the Butcher too, and that'll
There
be
you
another
go.
fun. Yeah.
I also love Joseph Gordon-Levitt's stuff in this movie, like where
Hmm.
he really wants to go to war, and then he goes and then he sees just the toll of war that it takes, all the bodies and
Yeah.
stuff. I know we see that a lot in movies, but I thought it was really well done in this one as well.
Great. Yeah, Lincoln nominated for the most awards of the day with 12. Only wins two, though. It wins, obviously, Best Actor for Daniel Day Lewis. It wins Best Production Design, oddly enough, too. What it doesn't win, but it's nominated for, is Picture, Director for Steven Spielberg, Supporting Actor for Tommy Lee Jones, Supporting Actress for Sally Field, Adapted Screenplay, Original Score for John Williams, Cinematography for Janusz Kaminski, Costume Design, Editing, and Sound Mixing. Um, do you think Lincoln was a good dancer?
I need more information.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, you know who is a good dancer? Bradley Cooper is a pretty good dancer. So is Jennifer Lawrence. Let's talk about their movie. Let's talk about Silver Linings Playbook.
Absolutely. Let's do
That
that.
was a forced
Silver Linings
segue.
Playbook, directed by David O. Russell, written by David O. Russell, cinematography by Masanobu Take Yanagi. Music by Danny Elfman, maybe another goat. Starring
Maybe.
Bradley
Yeah.
Cooper, Jennifer Lawrence, Robert De Niro, Jackie Weaver, Annapurna Care, Chris Tucker, Julia Stiles, Shea Wiggum, John Ortiz, and more. Synopsis: a man with bipolar disorder tries to get his life back in order and bonds with a young widow. Based on The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. We have a little bit of a Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad thing going
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah. Maybe they
Drop
just
the Facebook,
yeah,
and it's
maybe they're
just
just
Facebook.
waiting. Maybe they're just waiting to so they can reboot this again with James Gunn and call it the Silver Linings Playbook. It'll be a much
Yes.
more brutal film. Not that this isn't brutal. There are brutal moments in this, but you know what I mean.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, Chad?
Yeah, this was my second time. I remember really liking it when I first saw it, but I just barely remembered it.
Hmm.
And then there's just kind of a lot of these movies from 2012. I'm like, I don't really remember a lot of these unless it's like Django, where I watch a lot. Um, but yeah, Silver Linings Playbook. I loved this film so much. This film, I don't know. I just love this kind of like, almost like tragic kind of thing because it's people who are dealing with mental health issues. They're kind of trying to get like the help they need, but then they don't really get it. And then Bradley Cooper ends up like leaving or getting released early, and you get to see him go through this like spiral of episodes because he loves this person who he kind of messed up with because well she cheated on him, and then he almost beat the person who cheated on him
Hmm.
to death, nearly to death. Not he didn't actually kill anybody yet, but he wants to go and kind of reconvene with her, and because he knows that he loves her and he knows that she loves him. Maybe not, but that's basically his goal. But in that, he finds this other person who is hurting in different ways, and she's got like a lot of people having like this like kind of a sexual attention to her because
Hmm.
they think things about her that she is this person that they could just take advantage of, I guess, and stuff like that. But like she is this struggling person as well who's dealing with her own issues, but they meet, and then they have just this bond together, and then they end up bonding over the dance as well.
Hmm.
And I love the stuff. I'm not a huge sports fan, but I
Oh, okay.
love I love how integral it is to the plot later on because Robert De Niro's character is a huge sports fan, and then I love how he does not like Jennifer Lawrence's character until she comes in, and then she's like, you're gonna like me, and here's why, and I know more about this sports stuff than you, and
Yeah.
I just love how it all comes down to like this bet, and then it comes down to the point where you get the scene where you actually see them dance. They get a pretty mediocre score, but then like there's
But
a
they're all
pause.
celebrating it, yeah, because they got what they needed rather than what other couples in the dance competition really wanted.
It's like I don't know why they're so happy about a five. It was just such
Yeah.
a really really funny moment, and
Hmm.
the movie's not hilarious, but moments like that are just so well done that you're just like everything's kind of building up to that, and
Hmm.
it's just like this great moment where you're like, yeah, they're gonna be happy together, and then you get the full realization that because you think that she's hurting because she's fallen in love with this guy. He doesn't like her. He's still stuck on this other woman who does not want to be with him or is not good for him, at least, and is not going to help him recover and get better from whatever
Right.
is plaguing his life. And then she finds out that he did fall in love with her all this
Hmm.
time and like wrote her a letter like a long time ago.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I adored this movie.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got to speak the most about it because you really like this movie. I like this movie too. I think it's one of those movies where I think it gets its point across really clearly. It's charming, it's sweet, but like I don't have a ton to dive into it. I don't have a ton about it that I really need to dive into just because it succeeds at everything it's trying to do. I think it's a really well done acting showcase. I think it is charming, like you said, but also tackles those deep, heavy themes, which is important. Especially not villainizing or making bipolar disorder seem too negative either. It's more
Right.
about like learning how to cope with it, which I really like when films do that. When you treat something different about yourself as just something that makes you unique rather than something that like is a detriment to you. And I get like there are things that Bradley Cooper does that aren't, nice. But you know, at the end of the day, it's about learning how to connect with someone because of your differences rather than like needing to feel like you must overcome all your differences because some people just aren't there yet, when they're going through the process and it takes a while. And sometimes you just need to wait it out and just evolve naturally as a human being and resolve those issues and not rush it. And I really like that family dynamic and how that changes. The only thing I hate about this film is that it's about a bunch of Eagles fans and I'm a Giants fan and it's really hard. And I know, but the best way I could put it is if there was a film about a family and they were all Yankee fans, like how would you
I'd get
feel?
over it. It's a great film.
Yeah, no, and I get over it too. I think it's a good film, and I get it over it, but it's still tough because I have to get past that. I have to kind of like set my pride aside and say,
Eagles fans are
"Huh,
people too, buddy.
they are people too, but they harassed me in a parking lot when I was a kid and threatened to kill me, and my dad had to
Mm.
step in."
Oh
So,
shit.
I mean, sometimes they aren't the best, but
But
if you're
look,
an
you
Eagles
can't
fan,
generalize an entire
exactly.
population.
No, I agree. I agree. I've just had personal bad experiences with some. I've
True.
also lived with Eagles fans. I've lived with Red Sox fans. So like I have learned to find a common mutual
Terrible.
respect over fan bases that I don't like. I've been able to find common ground. We do a show together. We're Yankee and Red Sox fans. Guess which is which? I bet you can't. Just kidding. I'm a Yankees fan. But I think this is a really well done movie, really sweet movie. And I think Robert De Niro is really good in this movie. I actually like him better in
Yes.
this than Raging Bull. Sorry, I said it.
Yeah,
I think
same.
he plays a really great character. He's my standout in this movie. I know Jennifer Lawrence won; she was deserving. I do think maybe there might be another one or two that I like more that I might say later, but I do think Robert De Niro is probably my favorite performance in this. I just loved his character. I loved his arc as well.
And I love to see the great return of Chris Tucker.
That's right. Yeah, Chris Tucker. I mean, it's just a great cast. Yeah, it's one of those
Yeah.
rare movies that was nominated for Best Actor, Actress, Supporting Actor, and Supporting Actress, which I think is really cool. Silver Linings Playbook nominated for eight nominations. As I said, four of them, and it wins one. It wins Best Actress for Jennifer Lawrence, but it is also nominated for Best Actor for Bradley Cooper, Best Supporting Actor for Robert De Niro, Best Supporting Actress for Jackie Weaver, and is also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for David O. Russell, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. So that's pretty good slate of films. I mean, or pretty good slate of nominations where you get nominated for picture, director, screenplay, editing, and then all the four acting awards. It's a pretty good day, and you win one of the biggest ones, so that's pretty cool. They did not walk away with 0 wins. Speaking of 0, let's talk about Zero Dark 30, the ninth film on this list. We're almost at the end. Thank you for tuning in for this long. Let's talk about Zero Dark 30.
Yep, Zero Dark 30, directed by Catherine Bigelow, written by Mark Bowl, cinematography by Greg Fraser, and music by Alexandra Desplat, starring Jessica Chastain, Jason Clarke, Jennifer Ailey, Mark Strong, Kyle Chandler, Joel Edgerton, Chris Pratt, James Gandolfini, Mark Duplass, Jeremy Strong, Frank Grillo, and more. Synopsis: the film depicts a decade-long manhunt for the terrorist Osama bin Laden.
Wow, I didn't even realize you said Greg Fraser's name. I was like, what? Yeah, Greg Fraser
Yeah.
just won his first cinematography Oscar for Dune, and he just did the Batman. So like, he's on a
Yeah.
roll. Well, I know this was 10 years ago, but still. Um, so I just rewatched this today for the first time in 10 years, which was kind of crazy. It's crazy to
Same.
say that. When I saw it the first time, I thought it was okay. Watched it again, thought it was okay. I think this is one of those films where this film more than any other film, and even including Amour, which is very bleak and dark, I think this one has probably the least amount of emotional resonance and emotional weight. I think it's very much more like straightforward in plot and fact, and it's more just like we're getting to the mission, we're doing the mission, done. I mean, there are some emotional moments with Jessica Chastain where she'll like have a big monologue or a big moment, but it's still about the mission. Whereas I feel like a lot of these other films are more about like actual like human emotions in these circumstances, like Argo. It's about this mission, but it's about these characters and what they're experiencing and the fear that's within them. Even Amour, which as I said was bleak, it's about what love does to someone, even in the harshest of circumstances. Like I think there's a really good emotion to be found in a lot of these films that I felt was a little bit void from this one. I think it's well crafted. I think Catherine Bigelow is obviously one of the greats, another snub for best director that people were expecting. But yeah, I think there's something that just keeps me at a bit of a distance from it. But again, I think the beauty of this film is the fact that it was originally going to be something completely different. It was going to be more about the opening like half of the film. And then when they found bin Laden and killed bin Laden, they literally did a full rewrite to make it a movie about finding bin Laden. Like they totally
Hmm.
overhauled the whole idea of the script to add all those years later and make it about the Bin Laden discovery and killing Bin Laden. And I think that's pretty impressive. The screenwriter unfortunately didn't even get paid extra to like rewrite either, which was
Mm,
unfortunate. But I think it's really cool that like a movie can like literally just completely recontextualize itself based on current events. And the fact that like they released this movie when they did, so fresh after the events happened, I'm really impressed that they were able to get it done at all. And I think that's one of the strengths of this movie is that of all these movies, if you're going to look at a movie that best describes 2012 and what we were going through as a society, this is probably the best one in terms of just understanding the culture and the attitudes and what America was going through and just the anger that some Americans had toward this, obviously, but also just like the determination to end it and kind of have that closure and that final like we got rid of the enemy and now we can like kind of heal as a nation. And I think I was surprised when it came out at all in 2012. I was like, this movie's already coming out. Didn't this happen like last year? And I think that's pretty impressive. Even if I don't love the movie and don't connect to it as much as other people. But Chad, tell me what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this one's interesting. The first time I watched it, I definitely wasn't like, crazy, crazy, like super politically minded. I didn't really know a lot of the facts about what happened or really
Yeah.
understand what was going on too much. I didn't really pay that much attention, to be honest. So I kind of fell asleep the first time I watched it.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I wasn't like that, like deep into like, cine fandom or anything like that,
Yeah.
trying to, watch the best pictures, stuff like that. I wasn't really into that. I was just like, oh, let's watch this movie that's supposed to be good. And watching it again, I felt similar, but I didn't feel. I felt a little different too. I think it is definitely a really great, well-made kind of like war slash political film.
Mhm.
I think Catherine Bigelow did a really great job. She also did Hurt Locker too, didn't she?
Yeah, she did Hurt Locker,
Yeah.
and then another film that I love, Detroit, which I think is slept
Oh,
on.
that is a great
Really
film.
great
Yeah.
film about police brutality. I think it's a very well made film. But yeah.
Yeah, so she definitely knows how to make this type of film. And I kind of agree. Like, I think that like maybe it could have been a little bit more. I don't want to say it could have been better, but maybe
Hmm.
more like accessible for someone who isn't like super into like this, all this political stuff and can like understand the story for what it is and everything that happened, maybe super factually, whatever.
Hmm.
If you had like something more to like grasp onto, like kind of like an Argo does, where it has like the story that you can have characters you can follow. I don't think really Jessica Chastain. I mean, she's great in the movie, but like I don't think like her character is something that somebody you want to really see succeed.
Mm.
Personally, like I have a very different take on how things are. Obviously, Osama bin Laden was a very, very terrible person, orchestrated some very terrible things that happened. But also, this is a movie that I'm trying to figure out still if it necessarily says that the ends don't justify the means, because I think a movie needs to say things like that.
Mm.
And recently, I was having a discussion with a friend that kind of recontextualized this a little bit for me, where he said, because I was like, well, they just have the torture and then they move on. And then he said, yeah, but that's the point is they don't get anything from the torture. They don't actually learn anything useful from it.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows that they did all this terrible stuff to people, saying the means justify or the ends justify the means, but they don't actually get anything out of it. So I think that
Yeah.
is actually a really cool thing that they said,
Yeah.
because first, kind of second watch, it seemed a little cold, just something as a
Hmm.
film. It's almost like, why couldn't this have just been like a documentary? It didn't feel like a
Yeah. Yeah.
Sicario
Hmm.
or something like that, where you're actually following a really
Hmm.
good character you want to see succeed and stuff like that. So I feel you, and I also I don't know. I don't know where I rank this. It's been going around my
Right.
rankings.
Yeah.
I think I've landed it in a place, but it's one
Yeah.
that if you love this type of content and you love this type of just a hard line,
Yeah.
these are the facts
Straightforward.
filmmaking, you
Yeah.
might love this film.
Yep.
And if you just want like an actual like story, then you might not love this film. So
Yeah.
there you go.
I agree. Well, we're about to find out where it ranks because right after I tell you this, we'll be ranking it. Zero Dark 30 nominated for 5 Oscars, wins one. It wins, actually, this is actually a cool tidbit. It wins Best Sound Editing, but it was tied with Skyfall. So there was a moment where it was said there is a tie, and Skyfall and Zero Dark 30 both won Best Sound Editing. Just happens that way. Also nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress for Jessica Chastain, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Editing. So my voice is like, oh, it's tired after talking about 9 films, but we are getting to it. We're going to rank these films from our worst to our best. Doesn't necessarily mean 9 is bad, even though we both put films that we probably think are bad at 9. And number 1 is probably a film we think is really great. So at number 9, it should be no surprise what Chad and I put at number 9. For me, it is Beasts of the Southern Wild. Chad, what do you have at number 9?
Les Miserables.
I am shocked. I'm kidding. At number 8, I do have Zero Dark 30. What do you have at 8?
This might be a little bit of a shock to you, and I'm sorry about this, but Argo is my 8.
Okay. At number 7, I have Lincoln.
Number 7, I have Beasts of the Southern Wild.
All right. At number 6, I have Les Mis.
At 6, I have Amour.
All right. At number 5, I have Silver Linings Playbook.
5, I have Zero Dark 30.
All right. At number 4, I have Life of Pi.
4, I have Lincoln.
At number 3, I have Django Unchained.
3, I have Life of Pi.
All right. At number 2, I have Argo.
Number 2, I have Silver Linings Playbook.
And my number 1 is Amour, which means Chad's number 1 is
Django Unchained.
Which means collectively between the two of us, at number 1 on Chad's list and number 3 on mine, our collective best picture of 2012 is Django Unchained, the Quentin Tarantino, I'll say it, masterpiece. I'll be honest,
Yes.
those first 4 could interchange any day of the week. Amour, Argo, Django, and Live Pie. I love. Same as the bottom few. I could mix those around. Really strong slate. Now it's time to talk about our best actors and actresses. I am first for actors since you went first with Giovanni Ribisi last month. It should come as no surprise. I think he's the GOAT. I have Daniel Day-Lewis from Lincoln as my best actor. I just think he transforms into that role. I honestly think anyone against him in any year would have probably lost to him because it's just one of those like career-defining roles. After 3 already career-defining roles from like My Left Foot, Gangs of New York, and There'll Be Blood, it's like how many can this guy make?
Right.
So that is my pick. What is your pick for best actor?
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis was right up there in my like top 2. I have Leonardo DiCaprio.
That was my
I think
backup.
that-
So
There you go. They must be the 2 best because that also Bradley Cooper. But Leo DiCaprio lost himself in this role. Like I was talking about, this guy did not want to say the words that were on the script. He had to get like kind of like talked into it. Like, dude, you have to say these words.
yeah,
And boy, did he. And boy, did he go hard into this whole hatred of a people just because of the skin color
Yeah.
and how inferior he thinks somebody is. And he's just like one of the most like despicable monsters that you could ever see on screen that would just, in spite of people, maul somebody with a dog and stuff like that. It's just so hard to watch, but so good. I just love the kind of like zoom ins to his face and just his little smiles. You get memes of him all the time because it's just such a brilliant performance. A lot of his little facial expressions,
Yeah.
just his willingness to ad lib in certain scenes. He's just fantastic. I love him so much.
Yeah. So Chad, you're first for best actress. Who is your best actress of 2020?
I was jumping around of this, but I think I landed on someone because of this discussion, and I'm going to go with Jennifer Lawrence on this one.
Nice.
Just because I love that movie so much, and I talking about it, I was like, yeah, you know what? She, I think, is my favorite one of it because I just loved her character in that movie. I love just like her, scenes when she just thinks that everyone's against her. She doesn't have he's not going to love her the same way she does him. And then also just her going into the house being like, oh, I'm this person, by the way, because I forgot her name because I'm like that. But and I'm this person, by the way, and then she basically wins the whole room over. A bunch of damn Eagles fans, but still.
And if you're an Eagles fan watching, I don't mean anything negative toward you.
We respect
unless
you.
You're the guy who harassed me at the parking lot when I was only a kid, probably in 2012, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, then go to hell, buddy.
Yeah, great pick. I said she was deserved the Oscar, and I do think she is, especially because she had a good year in general with Hunger Games as well. I think she's great in that. My pick for Best Actress is who I would have picked as Best Actress. It is Emmanuelle Riva for Amour. I think she just takes on such a tough task of having to show this decline of health without making it overly, over the top, and just showing those subtle little changes scene by scene that from start to end seem like two opposite women, but as the film progresses, just you get that really slow decay. And it's a really, really great, mesmerizing performance. So there you have it. Our best picture for 2012 is Django Unchained, very deserving. My best actor, Daniel Day-Lewis. Chad's best actor, Leonardo DiCaprio from Django Unchained. My best actress, Emmanuelle Riva from Amour. And Chad's is Jennifer Lawrence from Silver Linings Playbook. That is 2012. A lot of great films, some not so great films, some films that I thought were great that Chad didn't, and vice versa. But hey, that's the beauty of the show, is talking it out, ranking it out, and then picking one that we both loved, which we do, Django Unchained, as our number one. So, moving on, next month, we are in the midst of summer, which means it's time to talk about a monumental year for a summer movie. That was right, 1977, the year where the big galaxy from far, far away graced our screens as one of the great blockbusters. It has become one of the biggest franchises ever. And it was just on draft day this week because there's a new show coming out about a character from it. It is Star Wars, but along with Star Wars, there are four other great films that we're going to talk about, and those are the Woody Allen rom-com Annie Hall, the other rom-com of that year, The Goodbye Girl, the Holocaust film Julia, the film we're talking about because of the theming, Star Wars, just a little film called Star Wars, and the ballet drama The Turning Point. So great slate of films that we'll be talking about. Some I have not seen, some I have seen, some I might have some controversial opinions on. Star Wars is trash. Just kidding.
Oh shit!
No,
You're gonna
I'm
get
kidding.
us like canceled.
No, I'm kidding. I mean,
I
who
know.
knows?
I know.
Maybe I'll rewatch Star Wars for the 40th time and not like it. Who knows? Anyway, Chad, where can they find you?
Excuse me. Yeah, you can find me here. You can find me sometimes on draft day. I love doing that show. That's a great show that Dill devised. Really, really fun. I'm over like in trivia, Spears. I do trivia all the time. Dylan and I recently had like a teams match over in Onto, which was really a great match. Check that out whenever they drop that. I'm over at the movie Battlegrounds. I'm over at TMG. Where I debate a lot of people. I'm pretty good at it, I guess. I love just talking movies, debating, proving a point, whatever. It's nice over there. We have a great time.
Yeah.
And yeah, on my own like little channel, I do some rankings. I did recently the MCU Phase 1, trying to do all the MCU stuff, and then maybe move on to some other things. We did Christmas, we did Edgar Wright, we did Harry Potter. We're trying to get a Denis Villeneuve sometime soon thrown out there because that's always fun. What else? Letterboxd, Twitter. I also have one other show that I do that's really important. Welcome to Primetime on the Nerd Entertainment Network. It's me, it's my wife Carrie, and it's my buddy Hunter Chambliss, where we basically talk about a lot of things horror. We recently did the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards for 2022. That was really fun coverage of that. We've been talking Buffy. We've been talking just like horror in general. There's a lot of great time over there, and that's about it. Thanks as always, Dill.
Yeah, thank you. And you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo at Twitter and Letterboxd. You can find me here at the Dill Pickle Movie Network or on podcasts for several shows. We're in the process of transferring all this stuff over to podcasts, so you can get it in both forms. But as of now, you're just able to watch it on video. And thank you for tuning in for all these hours. Next month, it'll be a lot shorter, unless we get into a 2-hour rant about how much we love Star Wars. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to watch a bonus film for next month, watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Should have been nominated for Best Picture, but who knows? Maybe these 5 are better than that. Who knows? But thank you guys so much for watching. That was 2012. Next month is 1977. I was Dylan. He was Chad. We'll see you next time. Bye.